So, Mr. President, if you want an ode to joy for the EU, I am not your man. My case is simple and brutal. Better in than out.
We are delighted to welcome Matthew Parris. He was the Conservative MP for Derbyshire from 1999 to 1986, reportedly given the opportunity to run by jumping into the Thames and rescuing a dog, which made him stand out to the Conservative Party. After leaving Parliament, he became one of the country's most respected journalists. As well as contributing to other newspapers, Matthew found a particular home in his regular column in the Times, where he's been writing since the 80s. He also won the Orwell Prize for Journalism in 2011 for his work there. He was a founding member of the gay rights group Stonewall in 1989, and he has continued to be a vocal critic of the Leave campaign, and in 2019 he renounced his support for the Conservative Party over their stance on Brexit. He is also, as well, and my mother will kill me for not mentioning this, the host of BBC Radio 4's Great Lives. She insisted that I mention it. So please, Matthew Parris, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, it's an honour to address your first debate in this series in this magnificent hall. Thank you so much for inviting me. I would also like to congratulate Benedict on a careful and intelligent speech, to some of which I want to come back as we go along. And my proposer, Cheyenne, made, I think, the key point that Europe is in a terrible mess at the moment, and it's in a mess because it's disintegrating, because it's divided itself into Democrats and tyrants, and we should have been on the side of the Democrats. I will need to apologise for language that I'm about to use. We in the Times are allowed to use bad language if we're quoting somebody else, and I am quoting somebody else. I'm quoting a man called Tristan Garrell-Jones. He was John Major's Europe Minister. He was involved in the Maastricht negotiations, a greater supporter of our membership of the European Union you would struggle to find. He was a Welshman who'd lived most of his life in Spain. His wife was Spanish. He spoke fluent Spanish, and he was passionate in his support of our membership. And I remember him in a little group of us. I know they included John Major, another supporter, another Remainer. I know they included Chris Patten, a very, very strong Remainer, and me. And Tristan rather surprised us by saying this: what you've got to remember is that the European Union is a fuckpig organisation. This caused quite a tremor in the little group to whom he said it. But I want to explain what Tristan meant. Let me take you through some of the more infuriating characteristics of the European Union. The European Commission is pompous. It's unelected civil servants, as indeed our own civil service is unelected civil servants. It's arthritic in its decision-making. It proceeds at a snail's pace. It has a crippling need for consensus amongst the nation-states. The Council of Ministers is an awful, awful thing to try to negotiate with. And it has to deal with the naked self-interest of all its member states, more and more member states, because Britain was very keen on enlargement. The smug, suffocating sense of superiority of an organisation that's seemingly anaesthetised from the electric shocks that the old world needs to survive in a dangerous and competitive new world is a very worrying thing about the European Union. In short, it's a great big corpulent blob, just like the British government, just like the United Nations, just like the Commonwealth, just like the World Health Organization, just like Oxfam, just like the Church of England. Any large corporate sprawling assemblage of diverse, often competing interests is going to end up being that infuriating snail's pace. What's the word? They argue themselves down rabbit holes, and they always did. So, Mr. President, if you want an ode to joy for the EU, I am not your man. My case is simple and brutal. Better in than out. There was only ever one intellectually coherent argument for Brexit. And actually Benedict made it, but it wasn't the Brexit we got. The argument for Brexit was for our country to take its chances alone in the world, to break free, to forge new trade links, to take EU tariffs on the chin, to cut the ball and chain of our welfare state, to slash taxes, to slash welfare, to smash the NHS, to smash workplace security, to stop cosseting the elderly, and leap unchained, lean, muscular, unsentimental, with only our loincloth and our sling, like the boy David, to face everything those Goliaths, China, America, India, the EU, could throw at us. That was a plan. It was an intellectually respectable plan. It was advanced by some on the Brexit side. I think it would have ended in catastrophe, but I respect the logic. I'd have saluted anyone who proposed that as they sallied forth into battle for that kind of Europe, I would have saluted them, but I would never have expected to see them return alive. The Brexit that we got, Benedict, the Brexit that Gove, Johnson, Farage knew was the only deal we could get first past the post of voters. Where was the logic in that? That Brexit was to leave the single market, then as petitioners to the Court of Brussels, to try to negotiate a trade deal. Where was the logic in that? It was to accept that we'd have to play by their rules, accept their regulations, rule takers but not rule makers. Where was the logic in that? Where was the logic in, well, Benedict said, tailor our rules to our own economic needs. We were not able to tailor our rules to our own economic needs. Yes, there's a point of information. Because we would be rule makers as well as rule takers, and we placed ourselves in the position of being rule takers. So now we creep, tail between our legs, whimpering for a deal that gives us as much of what we once had as we can get. It's madness. I don't know what the future holds for the EU. I'm not entirely hopeful. I fear that it may run into the sand. But I do know that it was worth trying, and that we are poorer, smaller, and meaner for having turned our backs. Cheyenne mentioned the mess that Europe is in. He mentioned the tyrants now stalking the continent. The EU is a band of democrats. It's a band of countries that believe in the rule of law and in liberal democracy. We were part of it. We were an important part of it, yes.
What kind of democratic Europe refuses to allow democratically elected representatives to craft its own laws?
Well, we have the European Parliament that has a certain amount of power, not too much, and I wouldn't give it too much more power, because that would infringe on our own parliamentary sovereignty. So, yes, the European Union could be made rather more of a democratic organisation than it is, but when you have an assemblage of nations with interests that are not always aligned, you do need a large civil service. You do need a certain amount of trampling on the individual rights of individual states. That's what cooperation means. That's what happens in the United Kingdom. The devolution to Wales, to Scotland, has reduced the powers of Westminster. Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. And the same with the European Union. We need that power. We need that assemblage. We need that cooperation. If the countries that believe in democracy, if the countries that believe in freedom are to stand together in an ever more dangerous and ever more menacing world, this is a world, and now in the 20th century, even more than at the beginning when we made this decision, now in the 20th century we see divergence, we see schism, we see division, we see blocks, we see threats. The European Union was and is an attempt to come together by countries that share more than divides them. We were crazy to turn our backs on it, and we will live to regret it for many, many years to come. Thank you.